Welcome everybody to the latest episode of The Haunted Hacker. I think this is like episode 27, I think. Cruising right along. Tonight we have Rick, who's going to talk to us about super yachts and shenanigans. Before we get started, talk about a little bit of news real quick. Big news, Colonial Pipeline, gas pipeline, got attacked with ransomware. And they had to shut down the entire pipeline, which supplies most of the gas, petrol to the east coast of the U.S. So more big attacks on infrastructure, and we'll see what happens from here. Back during Obama's administration, he made a statement, a really bold statement, where he said that any attack on the critical infrastructure is an act of war. So we'll see how the current administration upholds that. Anyways, other than that, let's get started. So I met Rick in Edinburgh back during one of my my talks at Edinburgh University at Napier. It was really cool. So the venue over there is really neat. You can literally see the castle in Edinburgh from the college, from the university. And the university where you speak is actually, it looks like a huge alien ship, like an egg, like a huge egg. That's kind of cool. Anyway, so met him there, talked about some security stuff, had a couple of clients at the pub, and talked about super yachts. And that's when my eyes got really big and my ears got perked up because I had never thought of that as a source of revenue or an attack surface or any of the above until then. Shipping, yes. Navy, Department of Defense, military, yes. But super yachting was something that really caught my attention. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rick. And Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what brought you up to this current point?
Hey, Mike, everyone here tonight. Thanks for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here tonight. So I started off in telecoms 20 odd years ago. So my background is Cisco, and I've worked through various industries, such as finance, working in London through some of the big banks there, looking after their global networks, London Stock Exchange, etc. And that really gave me a good insight into how these global networks are operating nowadays. And 15 years ago, it's amazing that these banks have all got their own internet, effectively. They basically throw money around the world at light speed. So looking after those networks, that's where I applied my trade for telecommunications and networks. Became a Cisco engineer. In 2008, we had the credit crunch, of course, and I ended up working in a hospital for a while, so I got some exposure on the public services side of life in the UK, which was a big night and day compared to finance, especially with the consequences of making screwing up the network. In finance, you're going to cost maybe millions of dollars. If you bring the network down. In the hospital, you could cost somebody's life. Needless to say, I ended up working in Aberdeen in oil and gas, and that's where I got into the satellite business and the maritime sector. So looking after, again, global networks for these satellite operators, especially in the oil and gas business. And did that for 5 years, worked for the client. We looked after maybe 5 big oil ships around the globe. 15 of these big drilling ships around the globe, and got lots of travel, got really involved with the maritime side of things, got more involved in the satellite side of things, network security, that kind of stuff. And of course, 2015, we had the price of oil crashed. So places laying off, and ended up LinkedIn, best thing in the world, best tool in the world for getting jobs these days. The company that brought me to where I am now in Mallorca. Gave me a shout on LinkedIn. Said, we love your profile. Do you fancy moving to Palma from Aberdeen? I said, yeah, exactly. So no, I jumped at the chance to do it. And that's where I was getting more involved in the network security. Did my master's in cybersecurity as well. And 2 years ago, quit the day job after seeing a bit of a niche. Well, obviously the job in Mallorca brought me into contact with the yachts. And that's how I'm, working in that particular sector. So, after a few years working there, applying to a trade again as a network engineer with more of a focus on security, I decided to take the leap with a few colleagues and start a business in cybersecurity in the yachting industry. Because until recently, it's been completely unheard of, and still is trying to get people to understand cybersecurity is a job. So that's kind of where I'm at now, and what's brought me here.
Very cool. So yeah, I spoke to you a couple times on the A Crew conferences and security talks, which was really cool. And it really got my brain ticking. So I was thinking about it this morning, approaching a super yacht, and how would I go about compromising it, and what steps would I take, to board that super yacht if I had to. So I started going through all the systems in my head, the sat nav, the navigational system, the security system, camera system, all those types of things. Maybe you can walk us through what a super yacht entails as far as like the technology on board and some of the entry points that someone would have with those systems.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first entry point is it's not even technical. It's the crew. So, if you can social engineer your way onto a yacht, then that's 50% of the work done. But the systems we're looking at on board, Wi-Fi systems, their number of access points that these yachts have on board to give a good guest experience, amazing. And usually if you go into a marina and anywhere where there's big yachts, you'll usually find if you switch your phone on, scan for the wireless networks, you don't even need to look up online where the yachts are. Your phone will tell you by their wireless networks, because they'll have yacht name, crew, yacht name, owner, yacht name, ship's network, for example. So okay, that's great. That's not too much of a risk in itself, but it does bring unwanted attention to the yacht straight away. On top of that, you've got the AV systems on board, so the entertainment systems, libraries and libraries of films. You've got the networks themselves on board. So that's really the IT piece. And then going into the OT piece, your operational technology side, which is the bit that gets overlooked more than ever. Like you said there, you've got the navigation systems, what they call ECDIS on board. This system coordinates with the autopilot on board. You've got the GPS, you've got radar, you've got engine propulsion, you've got stabilizers. So there's many different systems. Maybe they don't all connect to the internet. Some yachts will have systems that connect to the internet. Some will have, nothing at all, one or two systems. Maybe it's just for remote monitoring, but it's, there's a whole ecosystem of systems that can be compromised, and you only need to get one or two of these systems to make life at best uncomfortable, for the guests and crew on board. So it's quite an interesting ecosystem on there, and you think of the complexity, the amount of cabling that's there, and all the different systems that are required to just keep that yacht afloat and going in the correct direction is amazing. Not to mention, but again, the people side, the supply chain as well. So,
yeah, that and those super yachts are just one huge ball of wound up RF. All the Bluetooth and all the Wi-Fi and everything flying around. So in the Navy, we deal with systems and security systems, and looking at, when we're being targeted, throwing up shaft to distract, enemy radar or whatever. And I'm sure that there are some onboard defense systems, but it just seems that the majority of the, let's say, recreational boating and yachting, and some of the even more like stringent, more like shipping and shipping container and cargo shipping, seems to be very vulnerable. And it just doesn't seem like those industries are getting the amount of attention that they need to be. I know that a couple of years ago we had a Navy ship that ran into another boat, and they said it was a bad navigation or an issue with the GPS. So here's the thing: is that those ships usually don't have mistakes like that, which there could be somebody in the satellite or somebody in the navigation satellite tampering with things, which they've been known to do before. So what would you think would be the biggest threat to an onboard system, from, let's say, an attacker's point of view? What would be the sweetest entry point on a super yacht?
Well, for straight up would be the Wi-Fi as the first point of attack. Depending on how the systems on board are segregated, and what's on those networks. If you can crack the Wi-Fi, then you've got the key to the castle effectively, especially for those systems that might be connected. One of my colleagues did an interesting hack that got put in the Guardian newspaper a few years ago, whereby, just came close to the yacht, within maybe 500 meters, picked up the Wi-Fi network, identified the ship straight away. Within a few minutes, hacked the password. Was using, pretty poor encryption anyway. And from there, he was able to see bridge systems. You could have shut down the engines. So the Wi-Fi is going to be your easiest point in, unless maybe you've social engineered your way in and you plant a device that gives you remote access back onto the boat, so you can do that from anywhere outside of the Wi-Fi. But GPS is a big problem as well. You can spoof the GPS signals and effectively cause the yacht to go a few degrees off course without the knowledge of the bridge crew. Hey, we lost Mike.
Oh, Mike's gone.
He's gone. Do you know what? These yachts have got better internet connection than he has.
Yeah. Hey, so does your company also vet the crew that come in? We were talking about supply chain, because I imagine being a super yacht, you've got kitchen staff, you've got wait staff, all that sort of stuff. Do you guys only take care of the technical, or do you do crew as well?
Crew is something that we can do, and it's certainly something I would like to look at, actually. Because they're a weak point in the whole chain. And when I've asked captains about this, how do they vet their crew? They don't have any real way of doing that at the moment. And, they end up, generally the crew are pretty good, they're pretty solid people, but they do end up with some rogue agents on board in terms of, drink problems, drug problems, other things that, have caused problems when they've got guests on board at a particular time. And the last thing you want is one of your crew members breaking down just as the guests are coming on board. Or, looking at the grand scheme of things, it'd be ideal for a nation state or somebody with enough money to plant somebody on a boat. And this has got to be one of the risks out there, is that somebody's invested enough money to target a particular yacht or a particular owner, that they put somebody on board. He's there working away for a year, passing information out to the back to the outside world to form, a bigger attack. And it's part of what I'm finding is getting the crew that are there managing the yacht to understand that that's a possibility. They all think it's all a bit James Bond and that kind of stuff. And I say to them, look where you are, man. This is James Bond. You're on a $200 million yacht. This, anything can happen. So there's a massive lack of awareness, that mindset that it won't happen to me, is very apparent in the yachting industry. And it's like, well, why would anyone hack a yacht? And this is one of my favorite questions is, and yeah, why would anyone hack a yacht? So the answers I get back from chief engineers and the guys running the yachts are things along the lines of, well, there's no data on this yacht that a hacker would want. The systems on board. Why would a hacker want to get into these systems? My guests are not important enough to be hacked. So this was a charter yacht captain. He thinks his guests are not important enough to be hacked. You're like, well, hang on a minute. Why was I hacked the other day then? If these guys are too, not important enough. So, the perception that it won't happen to them is massive there, and it's slowly changing that mindset. But yeah, it takes time. I'll go ahead.
So do they pass this information then onto their guests, or is it just hard enough to get the crews to take this on board?
Really, for starters, it's getting the crews the crews themselves to understand the threat. So when we do a project with a yacht, we'll do crew training afterwards. Yeah. And that's everyone from the junior deckhand all the way to the captain. So we'll sit down with 15 of the crew there in the crew mess, wherever they want to do it. And we'll just do it's more of a discussion than a presentation as such, talking about, what those threats are, why anyone would hack a yacht, what are the threats to a yacht, and then just find out what they know about cybersecurity. And usually it's the youngest guy in the room, sat there with his phone, and he's like, oh, I don't know what malware is. And just a few minutes later, he's been looking at animal porn or something like that on the ship's network. So, it's amazing the ignorance, shall I say. I don't use that word lightly. There's quite a lot of ignorance towards the subject. Especially, you've got an internet connection. You're floating around on a multi-million-dollar piece of kit, and you've got, you're sitting ducks, effectively. Excuse the pun.
So I assume that at shore they're more vulnerable. Out at sea, when they have no connectivity, is it that satellite connection? How vulnerable is that? Is that pretty locked down, or?
Usually the satellite connection is pretty locked down. That depends on the provider, and I know. Initially, the satellite connections were probably one of the least secure areas, because you think it's like hacking Wi-Fi effectively. If you're in the beam of that satellite, you can effectively listen to all the traffic coming from that beam. And up until recently, I'm not sure how it is these days, but satellite connections were never encrypted, especially in the yachting world, because it would degrade the bandwidth and degrade the performance. So, until recently, satellite connections have not been encrypted. Now you've got the likes of 4G, and 4G is being used a hell of a lot nowadays when ships are in port or close to land. So they're a little bit more secure than the satellite, but still presents a risk. And if you've got remote access to a system on board, then it doesn't matter if the satellite is encrypted or not.
True. With the navigation software here, most of it is it's not open. There's no open source navigation software. Do you find that's an issue with like vulnerabilities inside that software, or?
Potentially, yeah. But at the same time, the way the International Maritime Organization mandates that software is used, there's already strict protocols for how that's used. So if we look at the navigation system on board a yacht or a ship, it's effectively double redundant, in terms of the hardware that's in there, the procedures that they use for updating the software or the maps, or the charts. Sorry, it's charts, not maps. Get that right. So these systems generally, the existing regulations say that they shouldn't be connected to the internet. So, and they use, the idea is that you keep that air gapped from the internet and the networks on board the ship. So, I think, yeah, I mean, open source. There's an argument for open source, isn't there? Because then you've got everyone's eyes having a look and seeing how things are going. But at the same time, a closed system, it's almost the Apple versus Apple versus Linux argument, isn't it? In that respect, each has its benefits and downfalls, I suppose.
What do you find the most? Oh, sorry, get going.
No, but the way these guys should be updating the navigation system, which is probably the most critical system on board, is using a USB stick, formatted USB stick on a particular laptop that's stored somewhere else on the ship, so they can upload the software and charts to that USB stick after it's been formatted, and then pass that to the ECDIS, to the navigation console. I was working with one recently, and they're like, no, it's fine. We're doing all that. We're following the procedure. And I'm like, great. I'm really happy to hear that. Where's the laptop that you're, using this USB stick with? And they're like, oh, it's this laptop here. This laptop that's sitting here with no screen lock. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Right next to the door to the bridge. Okay, let's have a look. So I had a look, and the out-of-date Windows, no antivirus, firewall not operating. And I said, can you guarantee that this laptop doesn't have malware and you're not inadvertently transferring malware onto the ECDIS? No, we can't. So there are flaws in the systems, that they're using. So yeah, there's always a way.
Mike, you back?
I'm trying to be back. We'll see how this goes. The bad connection here in the mountains.
Hey, Mike, we can offer you
another question I had too is
we can offer you some free satellite internet if you want.
Oh, that would be fantastic. I would die for some free satellite internet right now.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So looking at the vulnerabilities and it's really just a floating ball of internet on the ocean. And what I find really cool though is that there are transactions that take place in those international waters, and that's kind of where my mind goes when it goes to super yacht industry and security, is how much money trades hands in international waters every year. And I'm sure there are other groups of hackers out there that are thinking, how do I get my hands on some of that money? So looking at the financial, the need to protect your personal information, like some of these guys that rent these super yachts, I'm sure they're advertising, hey, I'm going on a vacation, taking photos of the boat while they're on the boat, even while they're out to sea, right? So you've got the Latin long, the coordinates in the photo if they don't turn GPS off, and probably most of them don't. You have those coordinates, so you kind of have a feeling, where the ship's kind of going. If you look at the photos long enough, and if there's a trail of them, you can kind of put together a map as to where they're going. So my thought is, once I find out where that ship is going, my selection of attack ship like a dinghy or a ribbar, rubber river craft, to get away from the radar or whatever. But also once you get up to the ship, so let's say I get within 25 feet, 25 yards, maybe even more, maybe 100 yards. What kind of visual systems does the ship have? They have external security systems as far as like video and alerting as far as coming within a certain diameter of the ship?
Depends on the size of the yacht. I think there's different classes here. So we've got the biggest yachts in the world owned by, Russian oligarchies, billionaires, these kinds of things. And these guys with a natural paranoia for security have got some of the best systems on their yachts. They're allegedly on some of these big yachts, there's missile systems or anti-missile systems. and you can't get too close. They'll detect you. Anti-drone systems as well. That's an area that we specialize in, but definitely the larger yachts. We're talking maybe 150 meters. I think the largest yacht at the moment is about 160 meters. Has a crew of around about 70, maybe more, and that's for around about 20 or 30 guests. And some of the infrastructure these yachts have got on board is immense. Once we start coming down the scales a little bit, we're going 100 meters, sub 100 meters, then these yachts don't necessarily have any systems on board to detect anything that's coming close, not necessarily, let alone anti-drone systems. So you could get pretty close. You'd have to have a visual from a crew member to identify that, I think. So physically getting close to a yacht, of that size, let's talk around about the sub 100 meters, which is still substantial anyway. Yeah, it could be, fairly easy. And then if you can spoof the GPS signal, get close enough, spoof that GPS signal, and, just give it coordinates that are 2 or 3 degrees offset from its current course, then the boat or the yacht will change course. The crew don't necessarily know. And then, for however long they're going in a direction or on a heading that they're not aware of until they think, okay, I should be in Antibes or Cannes, and they're miles away from land. So, half an hour with a couple of degree offset, I think you can, get quite in quite a different direction to what you should be. And that would be the worry, I think.
Yeah, I think that, along with, this is another scenario I thought of as well, is going to, I'm sure they have in some of these marinas, I've seen it before in like Houston, some of these marinas, they have like open house where you can go and take a look at some of these actual like operational super yachts or whatever, or, other yachts, just to open house and kind of publicize the marina. So I'm thinking, you go into that open house, drop a couple USB keys, maybe pop a few into a couple consoles and walk away. Now you're in that yacht wherever it goes. And talk about IT staff and security staff. I think that, boating probably lacks really badly when it comes to the security staff, from what I've seen so far. So if you don't have somebody on board that can, recognize those points of compromise, it could be a bad trip for everybody.
Definitely. And Ryan and I were just talking about that while you got reconnected there, is that the general awareness amongst the crew is shocking, to be honest. So there's a massive amount of ignorance to cybersecurity threats, and how that can affect the yacht. So let's not be under any illusions. Some of the biggest deals in the world happen on these yachts in international waters. That's what they're used for. So, dropping USB keys around, dropping a bug. One of the things we also look at is counter surveillance measures as well. So, that's having a GSM SIM card hidden in a phone charger, for example, or in a plug socket or something like that. So how do you know out the myriad of devices that are on the boat, especially if you've got guests coming and going when you're in port or in the marina, and charter guests every week or so? How does the owner not know? How does the owner know that his conversations aren't being leaked out and effectively being compromised one way or another through counter surveillance? So yeah, it's crazy.
I think we had a conference the other day, the CISO Alliances group, and they were talking to different CISOs and how they, look at the defenses of their networks. And it'd be interesting to see, what goes through a captain's mind, when it comes to security on that ship, because I think that, and this is just my ideas, I think that along with IoT and SCADA, I think that we're going to see some shipping and some supply chain, some physical supply chain issues come with cybersecurity. And I think that we've seen in the past, be able to divert GPSs or even shipping big cargo containers by a degree or two. We've seen that in large planes, like, commercial planes. So it's not that far fetched, but I think that they're starting to really look at the critical infrastructure and some of the IoT, some of the stuff that really keeps the country going, which shipping is a huge deal.
Definitely.
So I think that's probably the next stop.
So, in fact, the shipping industry has already been hit pretty hard. Just before, around about Christmas last year, there was a cruise line. They had two ships going around, and during the pandemic, it was unheard of. But they're just about. Cruise industry's been crippled with COVID. You've probably seen in most of these ports around the world, and all these massive ships laid up. So around about Christmas, one company had two cruise ships going around. They were advertising a New Year's Eve cruise, and over the Christmas period, they got hit. It started off with IT and communications down. Nobody could work out why. Then they lost comms with the office on land. Then they lost all electronic transactions. They couldn't take credit cards, credit card transactions. They couldn't scan the boarding cards. They couldn't get people on and off the boat. And this is a massive cruise line. Thousands of people effectively on the boat, getting ready for its New Year's Eve, soiree. And it started off with a ransomware note, and allegedly. It's a ransomware note, crippled the company, and I need to follow that up, actually. I'm not sure how they got out of it, if at all, but yeah, they cancelled the New Year's Eve cruises and, basically just folded for the time until they could sort it out.
Well, that's a big hit too. When you look at the amount of income just for that, probably just that cruise is probably huge.
Oh, especially at this time of, what we're going through in world economics anyway. That would have been, severe. And just adds to all the other things that are going on globally as well,
Yeah. And then you look at Maersk, like when Maersk got hit, it's just a matter of time before that perfect storm happens where you have, major shipping thoroughways being shut down because of either ransomware or some sort of orchestrated attack. And I find it interesting, we hear a lot about ransomware. So when Colonial got hit today, there was a assumption that it was ransomware. And I guess some of the indicators look like it's ransomware. I haven't heard the latest development on it. But it seems to be a lot of the industries are getting smashed by ransomware. And I'm not really understanding the pickup of the ransomware. Like when you look at the Colonial pipeline, obviously they're not going to pay a ransom because they're part of critical infrastructure. But just the fact that you would attack, something like that with ransomware, it just it kind of defeats the purpose. But I'd be interested to see the satellite security and some of the connections on board. So I know that like in the field, like in oil and gas, we use a lot of BGAN and a lot of that technology. Is that similar to what's on board on some of the super yachts?
Not so much. I think the BGAN is quite old technology, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, it's it's kind of moved on a fair bit from there. It's using TDMA technology over the satellite link, and generally it's not encrypted because of the large amounts of bandwidth that are required. I think it was, it's, again, when you were connecting there, obviously the satellite connection is just like a wireless network. If you're in the footprint of that satellite, you can effectively pick up the transmissions of that satellite with the right equipment and the right know-how. So effectively, you can, see all the traffic that's going on that particular pipe, that particular beam. But due to it's already high latency on that traffic already. So encryption doesn't really exist on the satellite networks. So there is a bit of a risk there. And I know there's been a couple of interesting studies into that in the satellite industry in particular, into, yeah, just what can you see? How easy is it to do? And I believe actually in the US, is there not regulations around that coming out this year or last year in regards to having those communication pipes encrypted now? I'm not sure if
There was a push for it. I'm not sure that they finalized that, but I know there's a push for that in the industry. Yeah, I'm kind of out of the loop when it comes to U.S. policy.
oh, sure.
I was so embedded in London policy that I kind of lost my way there. So one of the things that, like, we talked about BGAN and some of that technology. One of the reasons why I brought that up is because some of that technology, like, you can go onto the internet and look at some of these satellite devices, and they have embedded credentials, or embedded accounts in the device that you can't change or turn off. So I'm curious, like, those type of onboard systems, do they still maintain that same type of, history when it comes to publishing passwords and all this stuff?
So I know from the satellite providers side of things, I mean, the satellite technology is not an area I got too involved with myself. Opting to stay on the terrestrial network side of things. But I do know, having worked for the satellite providers, that usernames and passwords on their customer premise equipment, it's lacking. There's a lot of default passwords out there. If you've got the antenna control units down to the modems, usually the routers are a little more well secured. But yeah, there's a lot of defaults out there. It'd be great if there was a Shodan type search engine for that stuff, because you'd have a field day, honestly. And yeah, it's all connected to the internet.
That's not a bad idea. I just need to find a list of those distributors for that technology, and I'll put us together a list.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another thing too, like, when I'm talking about, like, attacking one of these super yachts, right? So we all know that getting physical access would be ideal. So let's say I'm in a marina. Same thing applies, right? So am I going to be able to see these systems, like, emanating like RF besides the Wi-Fi, or is it just that protocol I'm going to see?
I don't know. I guess on the RF side of things, that's an area I need to explore a little further, to be fair. But I would imagine there'll be certain systems and certain footprints that you can detect via RF. So absolutely, the Wi-Fi would just be one side of it. Looking at Bluetooth, some of these systems are using Bluetooth for communicating between different components on the systems. So obviously there's a potential weakness there. But yeah, effectively, depending on the system, depending what it's doing, and the footprint it's giving off, definitely. Because they're potentially more obscure ways into the networks than you would expect. So the Wi-Fi being the obvious way in, I'm finding all those devices that are either connected by Wi-Fi or hardwired into the networks. But also, yeah, the RF side of things is also a way in. Whether it's the, looking at the satellite equipment itself, 4G is being used a hell of a lot these days for reducing cost and higher bandwidth onto the boats as well. But certainly on a component level within the yacht, that's definite possibility, yeah.
So there's a question in the chat box. Wayne wants to know if most of the larger boats are using NMEA 2000 and their single bus architecture.
Yes, that's a great question, actually. And yeah, a lot of the boats are using NMEA. I think they call it NMEA 2000 as the way to describe it. But yeah, effectively. And again, that physical bus that you have going around the yacht, how well secured is that? I was working on one yacht recently where their core NMEA system with all their radar equipment was in the fridge room with no kind of access control. And there was, if you've got enough knowledge about the system, then you've got the right bits to plug in there. It wouldn't be too difficult to add a module, giving yourself remote access from that, the NMEA system, right into the heart of the navigation and radar of the ship as well. So yeah, definitely, absolutely.
I wouldn't think
the NMEA system? I'm sorry, mate.
Go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
What's the NMEA system control? What's its purpose?
Basically, it's think of a bus system in a computer. It's basically a communications network that connects a particular type of physical communication system around the yacht. So it connects the radar system to the bridge, for example, and carries those signals throughout the boat. And if you can get access to that, then you can effectively see everything potentially see everything that the captain's seeing on the displays on the bridge. So it's fundamental to the operation of the yacht. Yeah, I think that's maybe the best analogy, is that your computer bus system within your PC is effectively the same thing on the yacht or any ship for that matter. And yeah.
I mean, to me, it seems like it would be easy to conduct espionage on one of these ships. Be able to look at the charter and see when they're leaving, and going out to the marina and be able to either DOS or knock off their Wi-Fi and throw up your own access points, and just be able to know what systems are on that ship and be able to mimic those systems on a virtual box. Responding to the requests and getting its information, its configurations. It seems like you could really destroy a ship and its operations just before leaving port or going underway. I'm not formulating this attack in my head and planning this out, but I'm just like I'm thinking through it.
Mike, I'll be looking out for it.
If you see me in a wetsuit, there's problems. No, but it seems like there's
the reality's there.
Yeah, and that's my point. Is it seems like it goes external for the majority of its operations and the majority of its connections, and so it relies on satellite, RF, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 4 main components, and probably maybe a little bit of RF between controls if you have remote controls. But so with those four types of communication, it would be super easy to just stop a ship right in its tracks. Even without having to go to the GPS, you could go in through a different part of the Wi-Fi and jump over probably. Now, are the navigation systems and let's say everything else, is that air gapped, completely air gapped, or is that a VLAN?
Navigation systems, generally they are air gapped. There's the International Maritime Organization has certain mandates for the electronic systems on board all vessels. Well, I say all vessels over 500 gross tons and commercial seagoing boats. So that then, talking about these different categories of yachts, does leave a category of smaller yachts that doesn't have to abide by certain regulations. So, that's an even more interesting target, those sub 50 meters, or around about 50 meters, where they don't have to abide by international regulations. They can pick and choose as they want. Maybe they're private. But navigation system is generally air-gapped, and there are standard operating procedures for those that the bridge staff will follow. And that's, the idea is this integrated bridge that you've got is fully redundant. So if one system goes down, they've got backup of another. Redundant antennas, etc., redundant GPS as well. So the hardware redundancy is pretty good. Then there's the idea of keeping that off the internet as well. And, on a lot of these yachts, they'll have a laptop somewhere. And I think just as you came in, actually, earlier on, these laptops are how they get the charts and updates onto the navigation using a formatted USB stick. But like we said, if that laptop is somehow compromised, or never mind compromised, if that laptop is not updated, it's not running antivirus, doesn't have a firewall enabled, can you guarantee that you're not inadvertently introducing malware to the ECDIS or to the navigation system via that laptop? Off the bat, no, you can't. You'd have to check that laptop, and see what's on there. Not to mention the screen being unlocked as well. So who's been using that laptop? For the first officer whose responsibility it is to update the charts, that's his responsibility to keep that laptop clear. And if he can't guarantee that nobody else has been on there and that it doesn't have any malware, then there you've got a potential compromise in the whole chain. So even though it's air gapped, it comes down to responsibility of maintaining the infrastructure at the back end of that, namely the laptop.
Right. So when engineering like malware for that specific scenario, I think that in my mind, the idea would be to create some type of malware that would destroy the navigational system. Because in my mind, like if I create some type of malware and hopefully it'll get dropped onto the navigation system, what are the chances of that navigation system having a connection to the internet or legit like IPv4 address?
Exactly.
So the malware, I think attacks on ships would be more destructive because you would have to rely on, dumping code that would do immediate damage instead of relying on some sort of remote connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine if you lose your, the screens that are ever more relied upon by the crew, whether that's the navigation, the general health of the ship, valves, tanks, electrics. If you lose all your screens on the bridge, just that would cause enough of a panic on board. And how do you recover from that? So the IMO have recently just jumped on, well, not just recently, as of 1st of January, they've mandated that all yachts over the 500 gross tons, commercial, need to take cyber risk management into account. So they need to go through a certain process now and a risk assessment, asset register. What are the key systems on board? Do they connect to the internet? What are the threats? So what are the threats to those bridge systems, for example? If you were to lose all your screens on the bridge, how do you rectify that, or how do you restore the safety of the ship and stability, and get yourself either back to the normal operations as quickly as possible, or to a safe position where the situation can be dealt with? And I guess if you're, in the middle of a voyage, then that then becomes a big problem. So the industry is slowly starting to wake up to those threats, and it does seem far-fetched, some of these scenarios, but it's getting people to understand that these things can happen, and the longer they're left undealt with, or lack of understanding of what could happen, then the more chances there are that it could happen to them. So, and if it does, how do we get back to, happy days and happy sailing, so to speak?
Yeah, I think with ransomware, man, that would be pretty much a bad deal for the entire ship if they were underway and got hit with ransomware and it affected all the different disparate systems. It'd be pretty bad.
I know a few yachts have paid the ransomware, and they've been lucky enough to get their systems back online. But I know in the US it's illegal to. I think it's illegal to pay ransomware, isn't it? Over in the US.
Yeah, I mean that the government wants people not to pay ransomware, and they're talking about imposing a fine on people who do. But I mean, it's a whole American mentality of we don't barter with terrorists or whatever. But to me, I think that's a personal choice for the company. Is that something they're willing to do, or if that's a risk they're willing to take?
Well, it's quite a subjective thing, isn't it? I mean, there was a engineering company up in Norway that got hit a couple of years ago. Didn't really have any proper backups to their systems, and they refused to pay the ransom, and went on years and pretty much crippled the company. But there's the argument there that says, well, if you pay the ransom, you're just encouraging more people to try it. You're encouraging the criminals. So really to get out of a ransomware situation, you need to make sure all your systems are backed up and you're following good process beforehand before you get hit. But it's not until you get hit you realize, oh, I should probably have some processes in place to stop that. Right. Now I get it. It's always too late.
Yeah, pain's usually a pretty good motivator.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pay enough money and you cause enough pain, it usually, motivates you to do something about it. And I think the U.S. is starting to see a lot of that. I think they're starting to feel a little bit of that pain and starting to get motivated to securing the critical infrastructure. There was a lot of talks this morning about how much money we dump into other industries for cybersecurity, but yet the most critical industry we have, and they're still on like Windows NT. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So I think with maritime, right? So targeting would be key. And I think, just from our discussion now and just like looking at the different ins and outs, I think from what I've deduced, the best way to target the maritime industry is go for, there's definitely a threshold where if a ship is a certain size, that there's more policies and more compliances to reach. So really the personal and private yacht use, that's probably where you're going to find your shadier deals and probably your more lucrative deals because they don't fall under that compliance statute that the larger ships do. Is that correct?
That would be one way of putting it. I mean, most of the larger yachts are probably private and don't have to, necessarily follow the IMO regulations, although they probably will just out of, safety, but they're not mandated to. But there's definitely a sweet spot there whereby, I would say there's a sweet spot in size and whether the regulations apply to them or not. And it's definitely a sweet spot on the crew awareness to these types of things. The suppliers and vendors that help maintain a yacht. I think one of the weakest points for a yacht to be compromised would be in a maintenance period or refit period, where the ship's come into a yard, it's in dry dock. You've then got all the vendors coming in to do their various works. Literally hundreds of suppliers are involved in various facets of the actual working of the yacht. Not to mention the working of the yacht, but also the cosmetics of the yacht, so the interiors, the kitchens and all this kind of stuff. So for me, a yacht when it's under refit or maintenance and the supply chain, those smaller companies that are working with the yacht, and it's amazing how many small companies are working in the maritime sector, maintaining yachts, whether it's on the IT side of things. You've got a fleet of yachts and this one man in Italy who's looking after the networks and the entertainment systems on that yacht, and they've never been updated. He's one guy. He's looking after 8 yachts globally, and the updates that have been done on that yacht non-existent. Sitting around with Windows 2008 servers, goodness knows what. So, and that's just the IT side of things. When it comes to the engines, air conditioning, stabilizers, the list is massive to the number of people that are involved. So, there's in routes there to compromise the yacht. Absolutely.
What about the marinas? The marinas themselves, like how reliant are the yachts on the marinas for connectivity?
That's a good question, actually. These days with 4G, not so much. One thing I do stress to yacht captains, engineers, when they're coming into a marina, don't use that free Wi-Fi that the marina's offering you. That is worse, obviously, than the VSAT connection, definitely worse than the 4G connection. But it's there, and people do connect to it. And in Palma, where I'm at the moment, there's a couple of companies that are providing Wi-Fi across the marina, and it's maybe 4 kilometers from end to end. hundreds of boats out there from various sizes, and yeah, there's a risk there on that side of things, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, the marinas. I know that growing up as a kid in the Houston area, we lived really close to a bunch of marinas, and it would be so easy to take a Wi-Fi sample, especially once the guests arrive at the yacht, and just take a Wi-Fi sample to see what they're trying to beacon out to, what access points. I'm sure you could throw up a Starbucks access point inside the marina, and probably 90% of the guests will jump on that access point pretty quick. So yeah, like that's my thinking is like inside the marina before departure, before underway, when they're loading up and getting those last minute, checks off on the ship, that's when you do your infiltration and you embed yourself in the systems.
Definitely. When you've got those people crawling on board, yeah, why not? And why not have somebody that's a crew member that's working for somebody else, clandestine. He's been working there for years. Maybe could be a deckhand, could be ETO, whoever. He's working for somebody with ulterior motive, passing information outside to a company, nation state, and yeah, I mean, who's going to be targeting these yachts? It's going to be people in. Yeah, no, absolutely, but when there's going to be some pretty serious people out there that are going to be targeting these yachts, especially the owners and the information that they've got, whether that's to do damage to the yacht or actually do damage to the owner and his business or whatever that might be. There's a bigger situation at play than just hacking the yacht. Usually that owner is going to have some interest from nation state or a corporation, and it's going to be big bucks behind. Big bucks follows big bucks, and there could be almost military operation to get what's needed from that yacht.
Well, you look at some of the operations in the Gulf of Mexico and some of the anti-drug operations, and a lot of those guys from Mexico with the huge yachts and the cartels. There's a lot of military operations that surround that type of activity, and the Gulf is full of decent sized yachts, and we have the shipping industry here as well as like Carnival Cruise Lines. I mean, there's like a huge plethora of targets. But with the yacht owners, you bring up a good point. So with all of the riders and all the guests that they get on to the yacht, and with all of the business contacts that yacht owner has, I would think that their email and their connection, anything that we could get into the bridge would be prime, because with all the data that's in that owner's email would be insane.
Well, it's an interesting paradox as well, Mike, because the people that own these yachts in their businesses, I would say their businesses are probably pretty secure. They've got policies in place. They've got IT teams there that are looking after things. Maybe they even do red teaming, blue teaming themselves, whatever it might be, depending on what the business is and how they go about that. At home, maybe they've got a bit of security as well, security team and what have you. But when it comes to the yacht, which is operated as a business, usually outside of the owner's name as well, there's various layers to yacht ownership. It's a bit of a murky grey world, but those yachts are not really. You'd expect the same security that you have in your business, or you have in your home, and then when you go to your yacht. And the weird thing is, it's almost like the yacht lets the whole triad down in that respect, because I think there's a lot that's happened in the yachting industry over the last 10 years. Those internet connections have become, 10 years ago, they were next to nothing. So, it wasn't an issue. Now I've heard of yachts that can have 300 meg internet connections on with the right connections. And these guys are paying big money for big internet. But the way the yachts are run, they've kind of been left behind a little bit in the whole cybersecurity world, the whole IT world. VSAT itself is quite an old technology. It's old, cumbersome, that kind of stuff. So, and when it comes to the IT and the way the yachts are generally managed in respect to IT and security, they've been left behind. So these guys are entering their playthings, and they expect the security to be the same as it is in those two, home and in business. Whereas in reality, it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
I
think we're seeing that during the pandemic too. The security that we thought people would have at home, working from home, is not really the case. So there's 3 questions that actually 4. Wayne wants to know, do you think Starlink will improve connectivity and increase their security risks? I have my own take on that. Starlink, I don't think will be a threat or cause any risk other than what's already out there. You're just increasing your connectivity and hopefully increasing speed. But the biggest thing with Starlink is it's giving us people in the remote areas of the world a connection that's stable. So please don't stop Starlink.
No, I've got to agree with you on that one, Mike. And in fact, Starlink works better on land than at sea. There are some limitations to using that on a ship. So for the connectivity bound to improve. Security risks, no, I don't think so. I think we're at that precipice of what the security risks are anyway. So I don't think it'll increase or decrease them.
Well, I think also too, when we have MS Blaster still cruising the internet and still, in the wild, it doesn't really matter, if the security risk increase or not, because people still aren't taking care of like 2001, 2002.
No, exactly.
That's the problem. So there's 3 more questions. What sort of tools do you find yourself using to test the security of satellites and super yachts?
Generally, on the satellite side of things, not really testing. What I'm concerned with is the systems on board. So the main tools that we're using, I know one of your favorites will be the first tool is Nmap, straight out of the box. We're using Nessus. Depending if there's applications on board, I like to get into Burp Suite as well. And then, there's just talking as well, using my mouth. I like to talk a lot. So just finding out what the crew think about things and, just seeing what's going on. The number of spreadsheets that are out there with passwords in clear text is amazing. And just this weekend, I'm working on a boat, and captain's like, right, okay, here's the spreadsheet with all the passwords. Here's my machine. This is the password. And you're like, oh my God. Thanks. So I've now got all the passwords to all the systems on your boat, including external accounts. And I was thinking, my goodness, this is unreal. But that's not unusual. One point, I went to visit one boat, and the captain gave me a picture of the spreadsheet. I was like, where's the spreadsheet? He's like, he doesn't know where the spreadsheet is now, but he's got the picture, which he WhatsApped me. I'm like, oh, dude, please don't do that. But yeah, the main tools I'm using for that internal testing is, I find Nessus pretty good, although it's a pretty closed environment these days with Nessus. I know it's kind of had its heyday in terms of the input it used to get being open sourced. Now I think it's a bit closed and it's an expensive tool, but it's still good and pulls up a lot of good results.
Also, Nextpose works really well too. The tool from Rapid7. It's kind of like Nessus on steroids.
Okay.
So it's funny you talk about the spreadsheet. I hate to say it, but I think the super yacht and just the yachting in general, like boating, commercial boating and just the recreational boating seems to be a huge risk. There's another question. What controls do you find super yachts are lacking in the most? And I think that from the stories I've heard so far, it sounds like common sense is like one of the controls that's like majorly lacking.
What controls? All controls are lacking. All controls. No, that's, yeah. So, I mean, if it goes back to that awareness, doesn't it? So if you're not aware that any controls need to be put in place, let's use the spreadsheet as a great example. Having a password manager in place and using strong passwords, that's one control. Are they, is that control in place? No. So, it's usually the first thing that goes into my report as part of doing pen test on board. Yeah, most of the controls are lacking. Can I be fair? Can I turn that round? Sometimes they change the Wi-Fi password. Actually, there was one yacht I was on, and instead of the SSID broadcast, they used a QR code, which I thought was pretty cool.
We like QR codes.
However, that was a yacht I visited 2 years ago and said, look, guys, you probably want to hide your SSIDs and change the passwords, because they'd used the same password for maybe 5 years before. And the charter guests liked how that when they returned year on year, their phone just automatically connected when they arrived at the boat. So I'm like, let's get a control in for that, shall we? Let's. So, I'm trying to. I would like to give an answer to that question. Let me think about that, and I'll come back. But cool. Yeah, most of the controls are lacking.
So one of our sponsors is from Florida, and I'm sure they see a lot of cruise ships going in and out of, the Wonderland during the summer. And I think it's really interesting that you talked about, grabbing a crew member. So one thing I found like super easy in pen testing and red teaming is when you go to, some staff member that's really curious about what you're doing, if you show them a video of you hacking something, they will give you as much information as you need. They will tell you where to go, what to look for, what systems are which, because they just want to see like the effects. It's like magic. They don't care what's happening. They just want to see like the outcome.
Yeah.
So usually those guys are usually the easiest to solicit, and you can usually find them like in the pre testing meeting. They're usually the ones with the big eyes and are like, oh yeah, I know that tool. So when you actually start the engagement, those guys will usually flock around just to watch it happen, because those are your aspiring cybersecurity professionals. So definitely. Yeah, that's usually
evil band.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
no, it's I find that with the crew as well. I mean, you've got some guys that are pretty switched on and know a little bit about it. In fact, my favorite crew members, it has got to be the old school captain. The old school captain who keeps everything the way it used to be. He's got his Wi-Fi network on board, but he doesn't believe in having, integrated bridge. He doesn't want to connect all the systems on board. He doesn't want the navigation. There's no need for the navigation to connect to the autopilot that connects to the propulsion, that connects to the steering. We can do that. If somebody's looking at their screen, they're not looking out the window. So yeah, they're my favorite captains.
Exactly. Yeah, it seems like the yachting industry kind of reflects kind of the whole maritime traditional thought pattern, right? So I know in the Navy, the old boatswain's mates, the old salty dogs don't care about anything new. They just want shit to work.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot in like the new tech. So Amit says oil rigs these days are designing their IACS systems, like their drilling systems, to be standalone and prevent internet connection to such critical systems. Do you think that is the right way to go ahead, as opposed to expose the systems to cybersecurity risk?
I would have Thought so, yeah. I mean, why would you want to connect your critical system to the internet directly? I mean,
Yeah.
surely you have that air gap, or you have some kind of proxy there that protects the system being directly connected. So, yeah, I think, and that's that's even more important than a yacht or ship. These oil rigs and these automated oil fields that they have. There's oil rigs out there that are completely crewless. So surely that in itself is a wonderful target for attack.
Yeah. So I've been telling this horror story since.
Oh, since when?
Since when, Mike? Huh? It's a good freeze frame. That eye's gone.
He's probably still talking.
Oh, there we go.
He's back.
He's back. Welcome back, mate.
There I am. Yeah. Disappearing. Okay, so really quick. So we've been talking about this back and forth since the beginning of time. Like, do we patch all the vulnerabilities, whether it be internal, external? And really the oil industry really has struggled with that. So Rick, I used to work with oil and gas quite a bit. And I can say after SolarWinds, knowing the amount of drilling platforms that had SolarWinds connected to it, who had other services connected to it, it amazes me that we have not had a rig or a drill blow up since SolarWinds. Because all of, at least two companies I know, all of their clients that they provide service to rely on SolarWinds for connectivity and monitoring.
I can relate with that from my time working in oil and gas as well. SolarWinds became an integral part of operating let alone the communications link, but the various systems on board and on board the rigs. And it's amazing that more damage hasn't been done up until this point. Thankfully, it hasn't been done, but SolarWinds, shocking. Because back in the day, I was a big advocate of SolarWinds and went through quite a few installs myself. And to think that later on that's now been fully compromised, is like, hey, well, Rick, you said we can install this 5 years ago. So, well, if only I could see the future.
Things change quite a bit, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't have any more questions on my side. I think I've got a pretty good plan as to where I'm going to go and attack, but just kidding. So anybody else has questions, throw it in the chat and I'll make sure that we get it. Let's see, there's one. Are there any SIM deployed on this networks to monitor traffic and send alerts, report event? So basically, is there like a mini SOC built into these onboard systems, or is there any kind of alerting to look for events?
Again, it's an emerging discipline within the yachting industry. So I don't. On board, probably a little bit overkill. I think we can, we can use an external SOC, for example. So we've partnered with a couple of companies that provide SOC capability, monitoring the firewall. But then, that everything on board needs to be up to date. Their firewall needs to be up to date. Well, hang on a minute. They need to have a firewall for starters. So there you go. There's a lot of yachts out there without the firewall. I forgot to mention that. The firewall needs to be up to date. They need to be running the logs, and we can effectively monitor the firewall if it's installed correctly and configured correctly. There's certain stuff on the network that we could also pull off, but again, it depends on those devices being configured correctly. If the timestamps are all out of sync. Yesterday, I was working in 2013, according to the switch, the Cisco switch I was on. So okay, great. That's not going to do anything for CM or SOC. So I think there's a case there for it to be done off-site and remotely. You know, you don't. The idea is that the crew, the staff that are running these boats, let's be honest, they've got enough stuff to get on with outside of worrying about the integrity of the networks. They just need that shit to work.
And that's what makes them such a great target, is that's all they're concerned about.
Exactly. So, you know, there's something there to be said to, you know, take that piece away from them. You know, they're probably not going to do it properly anyway. So let's do it for them, and you know, ensure that it's done remotely off-site, and then they can get a phone call when Mike's gone to their systems. Then we can give them a phone call and say, "Hey, did you realize, you know, Mike's doing God knows what in your networks?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, we did realize, you know, the bridge screens have just gone off." So replace with Mike's picture.
Yeah.
You know? No. That would be too alerting. We'd have to do something a little bit more believable. No, but I watched this TV show on A&E or Bravo. It's called Below Deck, right? It's about the staff from these super yachts that go, like, they work these seasonal jobs and become like a staff member, crew member, part of these big yachts, take care of these rich people. And, you know, I'm watching this show and I'm watching them go through the boat. I'm seeing all the cameras in the boat and seeing all the systems. But the way that they conduct their business on that ship online and to the masses on TV is ridiculous, because they have internet running 24/7. There are video phones that aren't protected at all.
Yeah.
And they talk about, there's a couple like episodes where somebody's like they're going through the ship's Wi-Fi on their laptop or phone and getting compromised. And it's like, you know, as much money that sits on that ship, as an owner, I would think that my first thought, and this is just, I guess this is just like someone from IT going, you know, if I owned a ship, my first thought would be buckle that shit down because it's so wide open. But seeing how, you know, the guests can go out onto the dock and go to the end of the pier and like still be connected to the ship's Wi-Fi, I was like, yeah, that's an industry.
Oh, that I was on. Well, I wasn't on a yacht, so I was working with one particular yacht, and he just installed a new Cisco access point on top of the mast, so you could get the back deck covered. He's already got 20 old access points covering the various parts of the yacht, 70-meter yacht, and he bought the most powerful access point he could to cover this back deck. And I swear to you, half a kilometer away, you can pick up the SSID for that thing.
Wow.
The yacht was almost a diamond, you know, still picked up the SSID. And the ETO's like, yep, done a good job there.
And that's what really sparks my mind, right? So when you look at some of the technology that we developed in the past, like the Bluetooth sniper rifle and the Wi-Fi sniper rifle, with that design, you don't have to be near that ship. You can be off past, you know, visual recognition and pick up the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi with those devices.
Definitely.
So really, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to trail one of these super yachts and really just drain them every day of data, of any kind of, because, you know, people on board are going to be making transactions. You know, the chances of you catching a credit card number or some kind of banking details from that network is huge.
Just have Wireshark running there, you know. That's going back to the tools I find myself using. So first thing I do when I go on board the yacht is just fire up Wireshark and see what's going on. Usually when I'm on board, there's not too much happening in terms of, you know, activity, but yeah, just have a look at Wireshark and see the types of traffic that are going through the networks. Yeah, and on the wireless side of things, I know you've spoken about it before, the pineapple. Mm-hmm. That's in my bag every time, just you know.
Yeah, I got the tactical version of the pineapple nano, the Tetra, to like stick in the bag, like super short. And we carry antennas with us wherever we go. We have a ton of antennas. But yeah, like I think that's really cool. I think that, you know, as far as the next industry you get into, I think it's really interesting industry. that a lot of people tend to pass up, that they don't, it's not advertised quite a bit for people getting into security, that's an opportunity. So given that, people that are looking to get into cybersecurity, what would be your best advice to get into, to bring them into the super yacht security industry?
Well, you know, you've got two industries there that are very difficult to get into. I Shit. Yeah, I find myself very lucky, very fortunate that I'm in both industries. If we start with cybersecurity, the route I've taken is via the network world through telecoms, and I found that's complemented the skills I've needed in cybersecurity really well. So, if you're coming at it from an IT or network side of things, I think that helps. Going straight into cybersecurity, I think you need a base foundation from which to build upon to get the wider cybersecurity ethos, because a lot of it is technical. You've got 50% social engineering, 50%, literally technical. So I think coming at it from one of those angles is probably the best ones. Well, it's how I've found the way to get into the yachting industry. Maybe that's going to be even more difficult, I would say. So building up a business, getting into the yachting industry to start with, very fortunate. Found myself working for a satellite company that focuses on the yachting industry, one that calls itself a boutique satellite company. So very fortunate in that respect. And then building up a cybersecurity business within that sector, that's been even more challenging because the guys on these yachts, first of all, they want to know who you are. The circles are pretty small within the yachting sector, so you need to get known. And if you don't own a yacht, or you're not already working on a yacht as a captain or crew member, then it's very difficult to get into that industry. So I think if you want to get into that industry, cybersecurity wise, you need to have obviously the cybersecurity bit first, but then live somewhere where there's yachts, or come and talk to me, and I will help.
Or hijack a yacht, and we'll take you from there.
Absolutely. I was going to say own a yacht, but I prefer hijack a yacht, definitely. Let me know when you do that.
Yeah. Okay. So any other questions for Rick? Throw it in the chat. Ryan, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good, man. Oh, actually, I wonder if I could ask about the anti-drone technology you use.
Yeah. So we've partnered with an Australian company to provide that. It's a company called Force Pro. Well, Drone Shield Force Pro. I can give you more information if you want some contacts. Let me know. Again, it's still quite a new thing, especially to the smaller yachts. The technology is quite expensive. Uses a combination of jamming and frequency blocking and making the network busy. So it's a bit of a grey area. I'm not sure if it's FDA approved for the US side of things, although they do have a US affiliate. But So the way I've built Pelion Consulting is through key partnerships. So we've got the drone partnership, we've got a SOC partnership, and we've found that's the best way to build a business in order to provide the best service. So we've got guys out there already doing a good job of what they do in various facets. We come in, we provide the pen testing, the risk assessment, crew training and awareness, which we pride ourselves in. How do we offer the full security portfolio as a company that's only existed for 2 years and just 3 or 4 of us? We bring in other companies and provide that whole umbrella of services. So for me that's especially this day and age, I think, and in cybersecurity, is the best way to build up strong business and portfolio. Make friends.
I was really shocked when we went to the pub and you were telling me what you did for a living and that you tested super yachts for security. I thought, oh man, I've been in the wrong industry for so long.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting world, and yeah, I mean, just a day on a yacht. So, but yeah, for me, let's get the guys on board up to speed with what they need to do to protect the yacht, not only protect their data, protect the owner's data, and make sure they do a good job at it.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it, Rick, and I appreciate you coming on to the show. Like, that means a lot to me.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. Honor.
Yeah, we've been friends for a while, and I figured, this industry needs some spotlight because it's a really interesting industry and it's really new. So good opportunities for everybody. Everybody knows that we run everything off of donations. So we have the Patreon on the website, also the Discord server. So if you're not part of either one of those, let one of us know and we'll pass the information. Also, this will be broadcast on H4unt3d probably in a couple of weeks, broken down into 3 different episodes. And I appreciate those sponsors along with everybody else. So another piece of housekeeping I wanted to follow up with, that I had some good news for you guys that I wanted to wait until the podcast to let you know. So Range Force is partnering with us with their product, their platform. And what they've talked about is we're going to build a kind of a SCADA, IoT, ICS type environment through virtual machines for testing, for hacking. So any pack or access that's sold through Range Force will get a percentage of that if we build that piece of it, the ICS. So there's good opportunity there, and they're really good sponsors. We're also looking to get to Vegas in July, and we possibly have sponsors for that as well. So that'll be a 24-hour marathon podcast from the Florida DEF CON for 2 days. I'm not sure how it's going to happen. Also, there is an opportunity that I'm working with right now with a comic company that might help us with some advertisement and get involved with the community as well. They're called Cyber Comics, so you might want to check them out. Anyways, that's it. If any of you want to write articles under the Haunted Hacker banner, put your name on it. We're going to be putting together a bulletin that's going to come out once a month with security awareness, new exploits, and the most current release of patches and CVEs for the industry. We've got a really good group of people that have a ton of experience. Now it's time to take that experience and that knowledge and give it back. So we're going to do the bulletin, do it for free to start out with, and then we're going to charge a subscription to help keep the podcast going.
Sign me up for that, Mike.
That's cool. I appreciate it. I think Ravensec is also signed on to write an article. Anybody else who wants to write an article, please email me at hauntedhacker2121@gmail.com. Let me know what you're writing about. Give me a headshot, give me a name to put on it, and we'll put it in the bulletin. And your name will be attributed to it as well as the Haunted Hacker. And that'll be pushed out to the whole community through LinkedIn and through other social media. So that's it. Thank you guys for another great podcast. And I'm glad that I was able to stay connected for the majority of the time, which good news with that is we're going to get a better connection and it's been promised to me. So we're just waiting for that to fall through. Anyways, you guys have a great week and I will see you next Saturday. Rick, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.